Since its launch in 2007, the GT Cup Championship has become renowned for its diverse grids and close racing. As we approach the midway point in the season, let's take a look at some of the highlights of 2012.
The season started in conditions more akin to powerboat than GT racing at a monsoon-like Donington Park. As they blasted off in the murk, it was Martin Short in the Mosler who took the early advantage from Derek Johnson and Benji Hetherington in the absolutely spectacular Nissan as they all tiptoed their way through a treacherous Redgate corner. Dan Stringfellow was another driver showing strong in the early stages of the BMW from Kevin Riley and Lee Mole. Plunging down the Craner curves for the first time, Martin Short demonstrated his ample ability by treading that very fine line between having enough pace to lead the race and keeping the motor on the road. Derek Johnson didn't see an awful lot in his wheel tracks, and Benji Hetherington, who got the sense, was biding his time in the Nissan. The second motor in the race, Kevin Riley, had Lee Mole right in his tail in the Netta G50. Mole enjoying himself. But then the race began to transform. Derek Johnson was a casualty. Harry Whale began to start enjoying himself in the Porsche, powering past Chris Bentley as he climbed the hill. And on to the Dunlop Straight. The place was secured. We had a super battle for the lead of the race, though. Martin Short was coming under real pressure from Benji Hetherington, who was looking for a way through at every opportunity. That move at Redgate was thwarted. As they came down the Craner curves, the Nissan was perfectly poised to take the lead. Martin Short, though, has been racing for many, many years, and he was able to do enough this time around to keep the Nissan challenge at bay. Further back, Peter Rowbottom and Colin Broster were making strong progress through the difficult conditions, which were lightening a little bit as the race progressed. Next time round on the Craner curves, and this was a stunning move to take the lead, somehow avoiding the aquaplaning was Benji Hetherington, and the Nissan surged ahead of the Mosler to take the lead of the race. Dan Stringfellow and Harry Whale continued their battle as Whale surged up through the field. Lee Mole had a very lucky escape, just kissing the tyre barrier as Hetherington claimed victory. Marginally better conditions greeted the drivers next time around, and it was Nick Whale who powered into the early advantage from Martin Short and Derek Johnson. Johnson was trying to waste no time in gaining ground after the early disappointment and drew alongside the Mosler as they went through Redgate, making the place secure by the time they'd reached the Craner curves. Brave driving from the Ferrari driver, and Martin Short having to give second best that time around. The chase was now on for Derek Johnson, following the Porsche of Nick Whale. Could he find a way through as the cars splashed their way around what was still a very treacherous circuit? Well, Johnson was in the wheel tracks behind Nick Whale for quite some time as the field jostled for position around Donington Park. Eventually, though, Johnson was able to get the power down just a little bit earlier, moved ahead of Nick Whale, and that was to take the lead, which he would never relinquish, taking the checkered flag and his first win of the year. Glorious sunshine greeted the drivers next time out on the Silverstone National Circuit, a rare opportunity for them to plant their right feet in these supercars and see just how quickly they'll go. And away from the start is Martin Short, who jumps into the early advantage as they accelerate out of Copse, and on towards Beckett's. Richard Chamberlain pursues him in that immaculate Porsche, and then moving into third position, Kevin Riley in the second Mosler. That demotes the winner last time out at Donington Park, Derek Johnson, into fourth. In Group 2, it's Don Grice's BMW who leads the way, although he has got Nick Whale in very hot pursuit as they power down the National Straight for the first time, and into Brooklands with Short in the Mosler leading the way. But the fight is being taken to him every step of the way by Richard Chamberlain in the Porsche. Around Luffield they come and through to complete the first lap of the race, with Martin Short having that advantage. As the race wears on, though, It's an advantage that Short was not to relinquish. Richard Chamberlain gave the Silverstone crowd some superb entertainment as he followed in hot pursuit in the Porsche, but sadly mechanical gremlin struck and Chamberlain had to bring that car into the pits and into an early retirement. It was then the turn of Derek Johnson to see what he could do about closing in on Martin Short, but the real story of the race was a superb battle for Group 2 honours between Don Grice and Nick Whale. The pair of them, lap after lap, separated by well under a second. It was an enthralling dice, and it was a fight that was going to last all the way to the checkered flag. One of the beauties of the GT Cup has always been the multi-mark racing and the equalisation within the groups, and we saw that working supremely well throughout the Silverstone National Race weekend. But it was Martin Short who came through to claim victory. Stunning drive in the Moser, although Derek Johnson chased him all the way to the checkered flag. But what about that fight for Group 2 honours? It was Don Grice who just held off Nick Whale at the flag. Final race of the weekend, and the cars as ever prepared for the massed rolling start, and it was Richard Chamberlain who tried to sneak the early lead, although Martin Short forced him all the way into Cops Corner, and some of the Group 3 runners, Chris Bentley, Lee Mole and Peter Rowbottom, prepared for their own very close inter-group tussle. Derek Johnson, this time around, was able to withstand the challenge from Kevin Riley as they arrived into Beckett. For the first time asking him anything, it was the Ferrari of Johnson who pressurised Chambers as they come out to Beckett's, but then look at the Moser fly. Kevin Riley surging past Johnson as they arrive into Brooklands. Johnson, though, immediately repassing on the brakes. Well, close racing has always been a hallmark of the GT Cup Championship, and that was very much the case at the Silverstone National Circuit, with each group providing us with some very close entertainment. Group 2, Harry Whale, Don Grice and Pete Smallwood, the three of them were to run like that for most of proceedings. Kevin Riley and Derek Johnson swapping places with almost alarming regularity as the Moser and Ferrari went wheel to wheel. Harry Whale leading Group 2 from Don Grice and Pete Smallwood. Pete, one of the stalwart competitors in the championship, thoroughly enjoying his racing over the course of the 2012 season. So as the two Porsches sandwiching the BMW in Group 2, cars really looking at their very, very best, with the May sunshine beating down. As Martin Short, though, claimed another victory and the clean sweep at Silverstone. From the expanses of Northamptonshire to the twists and turns of the Kent countryside and the Brands Hatch Indy Circuit, the next stop for the GT Cup Championship. Well, the Indy Circuit has always been Chevron territory, and it was Jordan Witt who moved into the early advantage, with Derek Johnson keeping him very honest in the Ferrari. Derek, having been a frustrated but frequent visitor to the podium at Silverstone, he really wanted to score a victory at Brands Hatch. It was going to be a long weekend, as he spent an awful lot of time trying to find a way past Jordan Witt. It gave the onlooking spectators some superb entertainment. Well, the race turned into a bit of a David and Goliath battle further back down the order, with David Witt and Dave Shelton engaging in a very close battle, as did Pete Smallwood and Dan Stringfellow. The BMW of Stringfellow was all over the tail of the Porsche for much of proceedings, eventually able to try and make the move up the inside to the hairpin at Druids, but Pete Smallwood covering his line. But it was that sort of seesaw battle that we've come to enjoy from the GT Cup throughout the course of the season, and this was no exception. Smallwood having to work very hard to maintain his position from the fighting BMW. So here is that David and Goliath battle, as the diminutive Chevron of David Witt tried every which way to move ahead of Dave Shelton, the Moser, who had just enough pace in a straight line, but really struggled through some of the tighter corners. It was an enthralling scrap, and one which was eventually to decide itself in favour of the Moser man. In the meantime, though, it was David's son Jordan who came through to claim his first victory. Next time around, And once more on the rolling start, Derek Johnson trying oh so hard to snatch that lead from Jordan Witt, but he couldn't quite do it. And Witt held the inside line through paddock for the first time, and then had to defend again into Druids, with Johnson in the Ferrari pressurising all the while. Kevin Riley in the Mosler was also very much in the mix as the two leaders broke away from the pack, but not from each other. Johnson fighting at the wheel of the Ferrari. We saw some superb battling a little bit lower down the order in Group 2 and 3. Peter Rowbottom in the Ferrari Spider was making good progress, but really the battle of the race was one between David Witt in the Chevron and Chris Bentley in the Porsche. It was an absolutely enthralling battle. All the while though, Jordan Witt, David Witt's son, was leading the way from Johnson in the Ferrari lap on lap. He was able just to build up his advantage by a tenth. In the meantime, David Witt and Chris Bentley, their battle continued. Every lap, Witt was able to draw alongside Bentley as they accelerated along the Bradman Straight, but coming onto the brakes in Paddock Hill Bend, Bentley swooped across the bows of David Witt time after time. Jordan Witt, meanwhile, had plenty of work to do through the traffic as Dave Shelton and Pete Smallwood locked horns and had a nice dice around the track. Jordan Witt continued his winning streak at Brands Hatch. It's a circuit he's gone so well at here in the GT Cup. It's the same in June. Well, that's the first half of the GT Cup season in review complete, but join us after the break as the action continues.